Oh, how long was I gone? Remember emo rap? I know most of you are trying to forget it, but let's take a walk down memory lane. It seemed like SoundCloud was producing big name after big name in the mid to late 2010s. Young Lean, Lil Peep, Juice WRLD, XXXTentacion. They fused the heart on your sleeve lyricism of emo with the trap beats that were becoming popular in rap and hip-hop at the time, along with sampling popular emo artists like Mineral and Postal Service. And the genre got surprisingly big, making just huge stars out of several of their artists. Many people were seeing this as the return of emo in the mainstream, as well as a new direction for hip-hop. But the genre would eventually fizzle out after the untimely deaths of two of its biggest stars, Lil Peep and Juice WRLD. Just like any other genre or style of music that starts out really creative and unique, it was eventually distilled to its most basic elements and made more palatable for the mainstream normie listener.
And that's just really sad.
I bring up emo rap because there's one band, one group that I never hear talked about when people talk about the origins and the progenitors of the genre. The group I'm thinking about was just huge during emo's golden era, the 2000s, when emo was at its absolute peak. A band that combined emo and hip-hop before there was even a name for it. The group in question is Gym Class Heroes.
I love it how she brings booze in the morning, and it's so sexy how she can't remember last night. I made a fatal mistake of letting her drink again.
Hello and welcome back to another video. If you're new here, I'm Trevor and I am eternally uncool. I make videos about music, music culture, and anything that interests me. Mostly music right now. So if that sounds like something you'd be into, then I highly recommend subscribing to the channel and watching the rest of this video. Gym Class Heroes feels like an anomaly of the 2000s emo and pop punk boom. Sure, you had bands that combined emo rock and hip-hop like Hollywood Undead and Family Force 5, but none of them did it the same way that Gym Class Heroes did. They didn't fit in with a lot of the rock music that was coming out around the same time, but they also didn't fit in with the hip-hop either. They were an outlier, essentially. Malcolm Gladwell would have had a field day with them. Gym Class Heroes is associated with some of the biggest names of emo, as well as some pretty big pop stars. They scored some pretty big radio hits in the 2000s and 2010s, and frontman Travie McCoy would find some success as a solo artist. But then him and his band just kind of disappeared. Gym Class Heroes was one of the biggest bands of the 2000s emo scene, even if they didn't quite fit in sonically. They have classic songs that are still loved to this day. They're definitely far from forgotten. But the question still stands. Where did they go? What happened to Gym Class Heroes? Today, I'm gonna find out. So grab a drink, grab a snack, get comfortable, and let's get into the video. Gym Class Heroes has their roots in upstate New York, specifically Geneva, a city known for its winemaking. That adds nothing to the video. I just thought in case one of you was planning a vacation that I would just throw that out there. So there you go. Travie McCoy would meet drummer Matt McGinley in high school in, you guessed it, gym class.
He said it! He said it!
They both shared a love for music. Travie being a fan of the hardcore and hip-hop scenes of Syracuse, as well as having a love for all things 80s. Now, originally, Travie wasn't in the band. It was only drummer Matt McGinley, bassist Ryan Geis, and guitarist Milo Bonacci, playing exclusively instrumental music. And while at a party, the band was performing and probably wasn't getting the kind of response that they would have wanted. I mean, they were an instrumental band at a party. Like, what do you expect? So Travie grabbed the mic, started rapping, and the first incarnation of Gym Class Heroes was born. They would start off by playing small events, barbecues, college parties, as well as a few local festivals. And in 1999, they self-released a demo called Head Candy. The demo contained 4 tracks, 3 of which are lost. According to the Lost Media Wiki, there's not even any mention of the demo on the band's old website. Apparently, it was only ever released to people who physically came to one of these early shows and bought it outright with money. So if anyone watching this has a copy of that demo,
hit me up.
Gym Class Heroes would release another demo in 2000 called Greasy Kid Stuff. That's what I'm looking like in this video, a greasy kid. Jesus Christ. This demo is more widely available than their first, which makes things so much easier for me. What Gym Class Heroes wanted to do with their brand of hip-hop was bring a more lighthearted, enjoyable vibe to a genre that, at the time, was really self-serious. And that's exactly what this demo is.
Yo, hey yo, I live by the sun and I'ma die by the sun. Can't be living by the gun, man, I never even held one. But does that make me less of a man? Cause I got a spray can and not a gun in my hand. I got
This demo has a much different sound than what we know Gym Class Heroes to sound like. A lot funkier, a lot jazzier. There's some really cool moments here and there on this demo that really sets Gym Class Heroes apart from other rap groups and rappers at this time.
Yo, fuck a hush on the bus to rush. Acting mad dumb, singing bums, sticky bums. We was mad young. I remember acting a fool, laughing at the monkeys, fucking at Burnett Park Zoo.
Gym Class Heroes was building a local following with these performances and demos. With this following, they decided it was time to release a proper debut. In 2001, Gym Class Heroes released their debut album, For the Kids. Much like their demos, they self-released this album, and it had that same kind of old school jazz rap, boom bap vibe to it.
Jungle cats battling through musty brush. Monkey ciphering with fly feather birds with uncarcerated vision. Signified dandelions. Get crushed by overstressed orangutans.
To support this album, they would tour constantly. As they were touring, they were recording their second album, which would eventually become their breakthrough, The Papercut Chronicles. The crazy thing about this album is it wasn't even finished when it caught the attention of Pete Wentz, the emo tastemaker of the 2000s. Just like when most unsigned bands and artists ran into Pete Wentz in the 2000s, he signed them to Fueled by Ramen and Decay Dance. Which, Fueled by Ramen at this point was pretty much just Fall Out Boy and a handful of third wave ska bands. It wasn't as eclectic as it is today, where you have bands like 21 Pilots and the Front Bottoms. The addition of this rap rock group was like a breath of fresh air to the label. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows getting signed to Fueled by Ramen. Founding member and guitarist Milo Bonacci would leave the band. He would be replaced by Cornell University student Disashi Lumumba Kasongo. Bassist Ryan Geist would also leave the band, and he would be replaced by Eric Roberts. This lineup would be the one that got famous. This is the one the world would come to know, as the band started gaining more attention when they released their debut on Fueled by Ramen. The big song off of Gym Class Heroes' Fueled by Ramen debut was probably Cupid's Chokehold. This is one of those all-time 2000s classics that everyone knows. And I think one of the things that makes it so memorable is that sample.
Take a look at my girlfriend. She's the only one I got.
Supertramp's 1979 song, Breakfast in America.
Take a look at my girlfriend. Oh, she's the only one I got.
I think this sample adds a lot to the song's lasting legacy. It's a classic song, just so nostalgic and fun. Matt McGinley said about the song, "It was kind of an accident that it even happened. We wrote it in our old bass player's bedroom one afternoon, and it was really unintentional. We were just going to rehearse for our show. We didn't sit down and say, okay, let's write a song. That song just sort of happened. Our friend C1 had the Supertramp Breakfast in America record, and so he put that on and we would play that line, then drop it and we would try to keep playing. So we sort of wrote our own verse and our own bridge and stuff, and every time the chorus would come around, we would just drop that as the chorus. So that song happened really, really quickly. And then we went and recorded it for under $300 in probably 3 or 4 hours. The other really big song off of that album is probably the song Taxi Driver, if not for anything else than that it's one big giant name drop. It's kind of inventive how they can make an entire 2-minute song of just band names. And good bands, too. My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, Sunny Day Real Estate, Coheed and Cambria. They even mention bands no one talks about, like Scraps and Heart Attacks. I personally love this song because it's one of the few hip-hop songs that I can rap every word to off of the top of my head. I'm not gonna do it here, don't ask. The album itself is pretty quality stuff. I mean, I have it right here. It's a rap rock fusion that sounded different from every other rap rock fusion at the time. They continued touring, but now the tours were much bigger. They weren't playing barbecues and college parties anymore. No, now they were playing big name festivals. South by Southwest, Bamboozle, and the pinnacle of 2000s alternative culture, the Vans Warped Tour. This built up their audience big time. They started to get radio play, specifically Cupid's Chokehold. The popularity of the song just skyrocketed as the band was about to release their third album, As Cruel as Schoolchildren. It was so big that they had to include it on that album. Isn't that fucking crazy? The label was like,
do this. This is the song that's getting radio play. Fucking put this song on the album.
This could spell disaster for any other band. This could have been Gym Class Heroes heading down the road to one-hit wonderdom. Todd and the Shadows would have already made a one-hit wonderland on them already. But luckily, Gym Class Heroes was too creative, too catchy, and too ambitious to be one-hit wonders. By the time Gym Class Heroes was making As Cruel as Schoolchildren, they had been upstreamed from Fueled to Atlantic Records. This gave them a bigger recording budget than they've ever had. Travi's goal was to make an album that showed the effect the 80s had on him personally. He said they didn't care about fitting into a musical lane, considering how each member came from such a different musical background. So instead of fitting into a box, they built their own. The 80s influence is very apparent on songs like the fifth single and arguably the band's biggest hit, Clothes Off.
See, here's the thing.
We have to take our clothes off.
Sexy.
The hook sample is the 1986 Jermaine Stewart classic, We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off.
We don't have to take our clothes off to have a good time. Oh no.
I remember hearing this song for the first time, not knowing that the sample was a sample. But when I heard the original on one of those VH1 one-hit wonders of the 80s shows, I started to like the Gym Class Heroes version so much more. No, it took the sample, twisted it around, and made it their own. This was the first Gym Class Heroes album I really got into, and it's probably my favorite out of all of their releases. It's a solid album that I still love to this day. The album peaked at number 35 on the Billboard Hot 200 and 8 on the rap charts. Alternative Press called it nothing short of a classic, and Drowned in Sound said they had the potential to be the outcasts of the rock world with their creativity. Gym Class Heroes were becoming a big name in the pop punk and emo scene, which was a feat for them as a hip hop band. Hip hop and emo weren't as common together as they are now. Gym Class Heroes were kind of like the pioneers. They were headlining tours and making plans to release their next album. But could it compete with their breakthrough? I don't know, man. Travie McCoy would say about the band's then forthcoming album, it's just gonna be a real solid record. The demos we have are just bananas. And guitarist Dasashi called it the most collaborative album that they'd made up to that point. The album would boast several big names: Busta Rhymes, Estelle, and Daryl Hall, as well as appearances from both Patrick Stump and Pete Wentz. It looked like a recipe for a successful album, and it was, at least commercially. Debuting at number 14 on the Billboard Hot 200 and selling 30,000 copies its first week. A lot of critics weren't satisfied with Travi's lyricism on this album. Consequence of Sound said, McCoy lacks the thematic depth, lyrical cleverness, and linguistic ability to make very much compelling material. Consequence also talked about the amount of rap talent that was featured on this album and how it was probably kind of lost on the band's fan base, who is probably more likely to be into Fall Out Boy than The Dream. Conversely, Sputnik Music said that the lyricism was the only thing the band had left. They said that more focus was put on Travi instead of the entire band. They said the instrumentation sounds like regular hip-hop beats that would sound great from a DJ, but laughable from a full band. I don't know how that makes sense, but okay. Sputnik also noted that Dasashi hardly got to do anything on the album, and when he did, it was very basic. The review goes on to give Travi a lot of praise, saying he shines in front of the musical boredom and compares him to legendary rapper Talib Kweli. The review concludes with Sputnik saying Travi really doesn't need the rest of the band and calling the Quilt disappointing. It's no surprise that after this, Travi would pursue a solo career. He would insist that this wasn't the end of the band, that they were all just doing their own thing musically.
You sure about that?
Originally, he wanted to do something more introspective, kind of sad and somber, reflecting on his breakup with Katy Perry as well as his painkiller addiction. He compared it to 808s and Heartbreaks, Kanye West's very influential album, but ultimately Travi would decide that the material was just too personal. And he didn't want people's first glimpse of himself as a solo artist to be quite so bleak. I think this was a smart decision on his part. It would have been jarring to hear the guy from Gym Class Heroes do something so dark, especially so early in his solo career. The new direction would lead to the 2010 single Billionaire. The song came about after a collaboration between McCoy and the Smeezingtons, a songwriting and production team consisting of Ari Levine, Philip Lawrence, and Bruno Mars. Around this time, Bruno Mars was still just a songwriter and producer for other artists. He wasn't the huge name that we know him as today. Him and Levine were only paid $350 each for a week's work. Mars found this to be insufficient. Rightfully so. He explained, "We were like, is this the biggest mistake we've ever made? We thought we were broke in California. What were we going to do here? So we've got no money, and I'm walking the streets, and I came up with, I want to be a billionaire so freaking bad." Mars would show the hook to Travi, who would initially decline the song, stating, "Dude, we're in a recession right now. I'm gonna get crucified." But he would realize that the track had potential, and he started writing verses that mixed goofy humor with some political themes. And pretty soon, the two artists would have one of the biggest hits of 2010. Travi's album Lazarus would receive fairly positive to mixed reviews. Spin gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, stating, "Most of Lazarus is so bright you'll need designer shades." USA Today praised the all-night party jams and the introspective lyrics. The dichotomy of those two things is just
insane.
But you also had negative reviews, like Rolling Stone, who gave the album 2.5 out of 5 stars, calling McCoy's rapping more unctuous than charming.
Yeah, look at me, I can use fancy words, I'm Rolling Stones. Fuck you.
But almost as soon as he released his solo album, he would be right back with his old band. Almost a year after the release of Travi McCoy's debut solo album Lazarus was released, the band would release their 5th album, The Paper Cut Chronicles 2. Travis said about the album, "All I got to say is it's definitely going back to the essence of Gym Class Heroes, which is 4 dudes sitting in a room, vibing off of each other, and making organic dark metal. Dark metal is not something I would associate Gym Class Heroes with, but I like the enthusiasm." The first single off of the album is Stereo Hearts. This song has so much star power on it. Not only is it Gym Class Heroes, who are well established in their own right, but it also features vocals from Adam Levine. Maroon 5 was absolutely killing it in the 2010s. The song was just huge. I remember hearing it on the radio. I had never heard Gym Class Heroes on the radio before. Another song that was just absolutely huge off this album was The Fighter, featuring vocals and production from Ryan Tedder of One Republic. Another just absolutely huge pop rock band of the 2010s. This was the uplifting song. I saw this one a lot on VH1 and I also heard it a lot on the radio. Unfortunately, The Paper Cut Chronicles 2 would not get the same love as previous albums. Entertainment Weekly criticized the aggro crunch and laughable lyrical raging against the machine. And of course, Rolling Stone called it the year's most charmless album and called McCoy a laughably inept MC. But there was a positive review from AllMusic, who called it a blast from the past for longtime fans. After this though, Gym Class Heroes would just kind of disappear. In 2012, Gym Class Heroes entered a hiatus. The sources I found cite Travie McCoy's addiction as one of the main reasons for this. He always struggled with addiction and sobriety throughout the band's career. He spoke about it all in a 2017 video with R.A. the Rugged Man, where he states due to some medical issues he was prescribed Oxycontin, which is pretty addictive, and withdrawal from it sucks ass. But at the time of this interview with R.A. the Rugged Man, he was 3 years sober, which is fucking awesome. McCoy also talked about the pressures of fame. He would cope with it by using drugs and acting out. But he did these things to deal with being under a spotlight. In 2022, McCoy released his second solo album, Never Slept Better, which feels like the dark 808s and heartbreak style album he originally intended to release.
You check out, now there's a vacancy in this bed to the left of what's left of me.
The band would reunite a few times throughout the 2010s, but nothing ever concrete. And in 2022, it was announced that they would be on the lineup for the When We Were Young Fest. Hopefully this leads to at least one more Gym Class Heroes album. Either way, I'm glad to see them playing together again. I'm glad to see Travie in a good place. I feel like Gym Class Heroes aren't talked about as much in terms of mixing emo and rock as other bands. Everyone mentions Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park, Slipknot, but if you weren't into the heavier shit but still wanted to listen to that fusion of rap and rock, then Gym Class Heroes was perfect for you. You can say emo rap started with Peep or Juice or X, and maybe you're right, but personally, I choose to believe that it all started with one band from upstate New York.
We just don't show it, we'll shake up this town and show down the stars for our enjoyment. So sexy we are, so sexy we are, we break ourselves.
Do you remember Gym Class Heroes? Are you a fan? Let me know in the comments. That's gonna do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, then I highly recommend smashing that like button and sharing this video with everyone you know. Every like, every comment, every share, any interaction with this video at all really helps to get it pushed out to more people who might be interested in what I'm doing and want to subscribe to the channel. With all that being said, thank you for watching. As always, I'm Trevor. Stay uncool. And that's the end of the video. Goodbye.